Are you in the market for a home grain mill, perhaps the Mockmill 200 series? And if you are, today you're in luck because what we're going to be doing is a short product review, and I'm going to tell you a few pros and cons as well as a few tips of mine for using this particular grain mill. Stay tuned. Konnichiwa, Pat Tokuyama here, creator of the Japanese Cooking Club, where I help people learn how to make plant-based Japanese food. Today, I'm going to be sharing a little bit of the pros and cons as well as my experiences and a few tips of mine for using this particular grain mill. So this Mockmill 200 is one of the grain mills that you can get on the market today, and there are several competing products such as Como, of which I actually have their oat flaker, the Flock Man, which is a different review. If you want to see that, I'll link that in the description below. That's specific to making rolled oats, but it can also do grains as well, but it doesn't turn them into flour, which is why you need a separate device like this one, the Mockmill 200, which is going to do exactly that. So this does a good job with any kind of dried grain, any kind of hard grain, so any kind of a wheat berry, for example. You can also do legumes. You can do seeds that are not oily. So for example, sesame seeds, poppy seeds, flaxseed would be no good because they're oily, and they would get stuck and cause oils to accumulate inside the stone burrs, or the stone grinding things, whatever you call them. Anyways, the way that you would use this, or what this comes with, is not too much. It actually comes with what you're looking at right here, the lid, and then the power cord and a manual. So not too much to it. And what you're looking at over here on the side is the adjustments for coarseness. So I use it on number 1 for my bread making. I make a lot of bread, and that's one of the reasons why I bought this. And I keep it at 1, but if you want something more coarse, you can go up to 10, and that'll be more of a coarser flour. So for something like cornmeal, that would be an option for you, or grits. Why did I get this device? Well, a couple reasons. One is for the nutrition. So I'm trying to be healthy, obviously, by baking my own bread at home, and also using whole grains more often in my baking. That's one of the ways. And then the second thing is that this is gonna help to make your breads and whatever it is that you're using your flours for not only taste better, but more nutritious, because the grains are freshly milled. They haven't had a chance to, all the nutrients and stuff in there haven't had a chance to oxidize and deteriorate because they've been sitting on a shelf, or they've been processed some way to help them last longer and be more shelf stable. So you're going to be getting freshly milled grains. They're going to taste better. They're more nutritious. They're also a little bit more aromatic as compared to something that's been sitting on the shelf. And then the last thing is that you have a lot more variations and options in terms of the types of grains that you can use. So I bought about 10 different grains to experiment with. So like emmer, you can get hard. Emmer is a type of wheat. You can also get rye, which is another type of wheat. You can also get kamut or spelt. You can get durum wheat. You can get hard red wheat. You can get soft wheat. You can get red fief wheat. There's all kinds of different grains that you can experiment with, like I just mentioned. With those different grains, they all have different flavors, different nutrients, different textures because of the protein content. It'll keep you pretty busy. Even if you like baking a lot, there's endless combinations with all those different grains and flours that you can make. So chances are you're going to be pretty busy for a pretty long time if you're open to experimenting with all those different types of grains. Let's get into a few of my pros and cons for this particular Mockmill 200 grain mill. One is that it's simple to use. All you got to do is plug it in, and there's a switch here for on and off. That's pretty much all you got to do. Usually I turn it on first and then I pour in the grains. So that's all there is to it. You got to make sure you have a bowl or something to catch the flour after it comes out so you don't make a mess. That's the first pro. So the second pro is that it's well built. It's somewhat heavy. Make sure that you're carrying it the correct way. So that's why they put the little sticker here on top, so that you don't carry it by the hopper, which is not good, and you don't carry it here by the chute, which could potentially break. I think that's why they put that there. And that's why I left it on, to remind myself, so I don't do that. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is that it has this spout here, which is a good thing because it helps to direct the flour, the milled flour, into your container. So you want to use a container that's somewhat close to the edge of the spout so it doesn't spill out anywhere. And then the fourth pro, like I mentioned, is that you can also use it aside from whole grains. You could also use it for non-oily seeds, legumes, and even spices. So like cinnamon, maybe cardamom, or other hard spices would work in here as well. But it might make your flour taste spicy, so I don't use it specifically. I have a separate dedicated spice grinder that I use, but if you did want to use your spices in here, then what I would recommend is that you clean it out with a little bit of maybe rice, so white rice, to help get some of that aroma out. One of the good things about this, another pro, is that it doesn't require any cleaning. It's a self-cleaning grinder. If for whatever reason you get stuff stuck in there, some off flavors, what you can do is change it to the coarse setting, put in some rice or some other grains, and then let it go for a little bit, and then change it back to your fine setting, and it'll be clean. Another pro is that, like I mentioned, it's not only low maintenance, but it's also simple to transport. There's actually a locking function. You can actually lock the stones in place so they don't damage each other if for whatever reason you need to take it to your friend's place or somewhere else, like you're moving. So that's another pro. So the last pro that I have for you is that it comes with a 12-year warranty. It's like, wow, 12 years. 12 years is a long time. It's more than a decade. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years. They'll, I guess, fix something if something goes wrong, if something was defective, which is pretty unheard of these days. Usually you'll get like a 1 or 2 year warranty, maybe a 3 or 5 year warranty, depending on what you're getting, but 12 years is pretty rare, so I think that's definitely a pro. So some of the cons, even though I think this chute is good, I think it could be improved because one, sometimes the flour gets stuck here in the bottom, and so I usually just tap it a little bit to get all of it out. I think that's something that could be improved. I'm not sure if they just need to make it a little bit more steep, but that's one con. The second con is that it's pretty noisy. So I have a coffee grinder, which is noisy, but it's not as noisy as this. This is probably about twice as loud as my coffee grinder, at least, especially so if you leave the lid off. So you always want to put the lid on. And then I guess if you have something to dampen the sound, maybe some sort of like a sound dampener, that would help to make it less noisy. If you're going to be using it all the time, maybe you want to put some earplugs in to protect your hearing. It is pretty noisy. So that was the second con. The third con is that it does take up a pretty good amount of space. Depending on how high your cabinets are, it may or may not fit underneath. So some of my appliances do not fit, like my Vitamix is too tall to fit under here. So depending on how tall your cabinets are, this may or may not fit. The fourth con is that it's a very specialized device. So if you have no need to mill your own flours or no desire to mill your own flours, then this is probably not for you. You can't use it for much else aside from the spices or the seeds, non-oily seeds. So non-oily seeds you cannot do in here. So that's like any kind of nuts which have oils and fats, flaxseed, sesame seed, poppy seeds, are no good. And then the last two cons, number 6 and number 7, is that it does tend to heat the flour slightly. So you'll notice that if you're doing a pretty large batch of flour, so maybe like, I don't know, a pound of flour, for example, you'll notice that straight away, even at the very beginning, the flour is a little bit on the warmer side. So that's not ideal. Obviously you'd want it to be room temperature or cool. So if it's warm, then potentially some of the oxidation or some of the nutrients may deteriorate because they're getting warmed up. So that's not necessarily a good thing. And then the last thing is that it's not intended for extended use. So this is supposed to be used at home. If you have like a small bakery, for example, you might want to get the professional version, which can be run, I think, indefinitely. But I think this is like 12 or 14 minutes at the most it's supposed to be run before you're supposed to let it rest for a little bit. So that's another consideration, is that it's not for commercial use. So those are my pros and cons. Let me know what you guys think. If I missed any, feel free to share your thoughts below. If you don't think it's a big deal to you, let me know as well. Or if there's something that I missed, feel free to share below. So question of the day, have you ever had a freshly milled flour and used that for any kind of baked goods? Or maybe you've gone to like an artisan bakery where they mill their own flours, and maybe you've noticed that it tastes quite different in a good way. Let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't, let me know if you think you'll be trying one of those places out, or maybe even doing it yourself at home. Let me know right now. All right, so just a few tips of mine for using this particular device. Make sure, first thing is to make sure that you're using a bowl that's somewhat close to the spout so that it doesn't spill over. What tends to happen, at least when I use my stainless bowls, is that the flour, if I'm not rotating the bowl, for example, even though the flour is going to start to build up and become like a little mountain here, it's going to still spread out. But maybe if you're using a smaller bowl, you might need to rotate it as the bowl fills. So keep that in mind. That's the first tip that I have. Second tip that I have is to make sure that you calibrate initially these stones so that the fine setting is actually at the finest setting, and you'll be able to know that when you're setting this up. It's going to make an audible noise. There's actually tutorials that you can find online that show you exactly how you're supposed to calibrate the stones so that you're getting the finest setting possible. Third tip that I have is to use organic grains if possible. Try to source organic grains. There's plenty of places that you can get it online. That way you're getting the healthiest type of grain that you can use. If you can't get organic, then get non-GMO, non-genetically modified grains at least, and that'll get you the most nutritious and I guess chemical or pesticide-free grains that you can get. Third thing is try different grains. So one of the benefits is the freedom, or I guess the flexibility that you have in terms of choices. Obviously at the supermarket, they can't carry like 10 or 20 different types of flours because they probably not have that high of a turnover to get through all of those different types. But because you're using whole grains, the whole grains, because they haven't been cut open or processed in any way, they're going to be a lot more shelf stable than a flour. So you can try a bunch. I actually bought like over 10 different types of whole grains when I got this initially, and I've gradually tested all of them, and they all taste different in their own unique and delicious way. So highly recommend that as well. So that's my fourth tip. The fifth tip is to also weigh your ingredients. Use a scale as you're milling your flour so you know exactly how much to mill, because if you over mill, you're going to be left with extra flour, which you want to use right away, because that's the whole point of milling your flour, is to keep the nutrition and also the flavor and the aroma, which is going to be lost if you just let it sit in your pantry or maybe even in your freezer. So always make sure you use a scale. I think that's going to be it. So if anything else that I forgot to say, I'll leave in the description below, as well as links to this particular device and the blog post. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. Let me know what you guys think of this video. If you have any feedback, any thoughts, give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. And if you want to see more videos like this one, and also Japanese plant-based cooking videos, subscribe if you haven't already. And I think I'll see you guys in my next video. So, take care. Bye-bye. So you want to know the real reason why I got a grain mill? Because I love eating bread. That's probably one of my favorite courses, at least at a French restaurant when they serve bread, is getting to try all the different types of bread. And using this home grain mill has enabled me to re-experience some of those flavors, textures, and aromas that I experienced when I was traveling and dining out. So that's another important reason to keep in mind.